Hello and Shabbat Shalom. Uh, the Torah portion for this week is Devarim, and we've got a really good teaching online, and I hope you'll take time to read it. Devarim is the first, begins Deuteronomy, and begins with Deuteronomy 1:1, goes and through 3:22. So it says Moshe says that God went ahead of Israel and prepared places for them and led them. And Israel, the people, wondered, where are they going? And so a lot of people, when they first, believe in God, well, they think, well, what am I supposed to do? Where am I going? And it was the same for Israel. It's the same for everybody that seeks God. It begins by us first seeking Him, and it's a journey. God told Israel in this portion not to enter Esau's land, which was Edom, but pay them for the water and for anything that they use. And also, as they later on, then Israel does the same thing with the cities of the kings of Og and Sichon, but they were against Israel, and so they ended up fighting Israel instead. And they should have realized, that Israel was willing to pay, give them reparation for anything that they took. So, but instead they opposed Israel. Also in this portion we find out that those that were going to live east of the Yarden River, the Jordan, were to help fight to the west of the Jordan. They were just about to enter the land, and so Moshe is giving them kind of a recap of everything that's happened, and we see this a lot in the writing style of that time, where we see two instances of creation. We see most of the time there's two stories involved with everything that goes on. They recap things, and so it's the same thing with Deuteronomy. And so the writing style then changed after this, and so we know that Moshe actually did write the Torah because of the writing style at the time. It followed the writing style, now Israel. They could have been afraid to move forward, and at times they were not filled with some questions and some fears. When you think about it, it took a great amount of faith for them to leave the comfort of Egypt, where at least they were settled, and they went into the desert, of all things. And so it's an example for us that we should be willing to follow God and do what He says and trust in Him. A lot of people criticize Israel, and they take anything negative written about them and they talk about that instead of the great victory that Israel accomplished through their leaving and through their trials and overcoming their trials. And in fact, Yeshua says that those who are overcomers will be with Him in the future kingdom. And so that is our goal as well, sort of like entering the promised land. And we see that's kind of a picture of us in this present age, this messianic age. And Kepha, Peter, that's his real name, Kepha, tells those in Acts 2 to believe and they will receive the Holy Spirit. And so, here Israel believed and received the promise of going into their land. And a lot of people, they will not believe and enter the promise that God gave them, that God gives them the Holy Spirit. And so it's to Christianity's discredit that we put down the promises and goodness of God. And they, theologize it and make up stuff, and say, oh, well, it's not really for us, but it's clearly, if you read the Bible, it's clearly for us, And as a matter of fact, talking about the Holy Spirit, Shmuel says in Acts chapter 14 that these are commandments of God. So what makes people think that they can reinterpret the Bible and say that they are not for us? They're just making stuff up. It says in Isaiah 1:16 through 18, wash yourselves clean, get your evil deeds out of my sight, stop doing evil, learn to do good. And we understand that good, and from a biblical perspective, is to follow God's commandments. And we are going to be judged by God's standards, not by what we think is right. God is big enough, He can define what is right. You might think, well, why? Why should we follow God? Psalms 119, 160 says, the entirety of your word, talking about the Bible, is truth. And every one of your righteous judgments, His commandments, endures forever. So don't diminish what God has given you. Yeshua says the same thing about the Old Testament in John 17:17. There was no New Testament at the time. And He says, sanctify them by your truth. Set them aside by your truth. So I'm not going to be going through the whole portion for today, the whole teaching. I just want to give you a touch of what's in it, and I would hope that you would study it for yourself. We don't decide to love God by doing things our own way. It's just like if we care about, our parents, we do what they say, because we know that they have our best interests at heart. Deuteronomy 11:1 says, therefore you shall love the Lord your God, and keep His charge, His statutes, His judgments, and His commandments always. So the Bible defines how to love God by keeping what God says. And so if you're not keeping what God says, you're disrespecting God. So maybe just one more thing I'd like to share with you. There's a whole bunch of really good things in this teaching that I think you'll enjoy reading. It says that God was tired of their empty adherences, the things that they had just made up. And so we shouldn't want to just do things our own way. And lastly of all, I just want to share something here. Decide to be a kingdom-focused person. Live your life with God. Be attached to God. Be a holy and good person. We need God's wisdom and understanding from the Torah, and Deuteronomy 4:6, that's what it says. And we also need the work of the Holy Spirit in this Messianic age. It says in Colossians 1:11 that we are to be strengthened with all might according to His glorious power. And it is the power of the Holy Spirit that is at work in believers as well. The first thing we need to learn to do is to follow His commandments, and the Holy Spirit can start helping us. Deuteronomy 4:6 says, therefore be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So I'm sorry, all you people who take the scriptures out of their Jewish biblical context. Shul is refers to the Torah when he says that it's good for us, for doctrine, reproof, correction. It's in 2 Timothy. So we're not a book club. We're not just, reading a book and sharing stuff out of a book for our own interests. We're not just a hangout where we just hang out together, but we're following a God that knows what is right and good. A God, a creator that created everything, that knows what's best for us and has our best interests at heart. So I hope you will take time to go through the teaching for Devarim, and I hope you will be blessed this week and have a good week. Shavua Tov.